Hey everybody, welcome to the Blockchain and Aviation live broadcast. Today we have another exciting subject that we're going to be talking about. And for those of you that don't really know, we are getting into air traffic management. And we're going to be talking about how blockchain actually is being used in air traffic management. But more than that, I'm bringing to you expertise and subject matter knowledge of actually the air traffic control system and air traffic management and uncrewed traffic management, and what's happening and how blockchain is really moving us forward. This is going to be a great subject. I don't think you want to miss it. Stand by. It's going to be a lot of fun. And in just a second here, I'm going to bring in my guest. Let me bring him in and we'll make an introduction.
Hey.
Hello. Hi, Simon. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you, Mark. How are you?
Very good. I'm doing fine. And for those watching out there, where are you joining us from today?
So I'm near Reading in the UK, which is about 15 miles west of Windsor.
Fantastic. Excellent. I'm glad to have you with us on a Friday night. I appreciate it. And hey, I want everybody watching to know just a little bit about you. And so maybe we can just start out with just sort of a brief, quick statement and tell everybody just who you are and what do you do.
Yeah, sure. I'm Simon Brown. I'm currently enterprise architect for airline operations at easyJet. I joined 3 months ago, but prior to that, I've spent a good portion of my career, in fact, most of it, in air traffic management. I joined NATS in the UK in '99 and stayed there as a stopgap for some 17 years before joining Heathrow Airport. And then during the pandemic, took the opportunity to do some collaborative R&D and stepped out of Heathrow and worked in a small startup. So yeah, happy to be here sharing my knowledge about all things air traffic management and the new world of Web3.
Yeah, that's really great. Not everybody, well, I know everybody knows that air traffic management is a critical component, of our air traffic system, but I'm not really sure people, completely understand, the impact that it has on efficiency and the ability of us to be able to operate. And so what we're going to be doing today, everybody watching out there, is we're going to be getting into what are the real challenges in the industry out there today, and what are some of the ways that some of the new technologies are enabling us to be able to solve that. And then we have some conversation that we're going to have at the end about some things specifically that Simon is involved in to be able to help make some efficiencies and changes in the industry. It's good. So, hey, listen, as we're getting started, I always like to acknowledge the people that are watching. Everybody watching knows that. And I really would like for you to help us out. And we're really trying to get knowledge of blockchain, in aviation out. And I'd appreciate it if you could start out by helping us and just share this stream. You'd be amazed at how much traction we get when we share this stream. I looked at the broadcast statistics for this week so far, and I think we've reached about 15,000 people in the broadcast this week. And since we've started, I think we've reached probably around 50 or 60,000 people, through the broadcast. And so for me, it's really exciting that we get to talk about aviation and digital and blockchain. And so if you could help us share that, I would really appreciate it. And then in addition to that, I love having knowing where people are coming from. Let me just jump in first and say, you said you were near Windsor, Simon? Is that what you said?
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And for those that might be other places around the world, where is Windsor in relationship to London, for example?
Yeah, it's about 20 miles west of London.
20 miles west of London. Okay, great. All right. And so if you're watching out there, let us know where you're watching from. Just drop a note in the comment box and say you're watching from a particular location, and we'll give you a shout out as part of that. We really like to do that. And then remember, we're going to be taking some questions again, like we always do. And so it's always fantastic to be able to take questions. Hey, just so that we can be confusing here, we have a Simon Barker that I know also in the UK. But on the broadcast today, we have Simon Brown. And so Simon Barker, thanks for joining. I really appreciate you being here and jumping on the broadcast with us. We always have people joining from all around the world, which is really pretty amazing. And it's fun just to see how we can connect with people and get the word out to everybody. Hey, listen, let's start out and just jump in a little bit. And I'd like to know if you could just give us a little bit of information or background about yourself. What have you done? And you said you were in air traffic management, and just give us a brief of just what your history is.
Sure, no problem. So
yeah,
I started my career in '99 in air traffic control. I was working in the flight data processing teams, looking after client server equipment, the computing equipment that would turn one set of gobbledygook coming out of a system which was built in pretty much the 1940s and 50s, with teletypewriter text coming through it and converting it into another type of gobbledygook that a mainframe computer would understand. And that was my first real exposure to just how legacy a lot of the technologies are within the air traffic management space. So as I moved through my early career in that, so I found myself into all sorts of project management and investment planning. Eventually found my way into product development and sales. Had a lovely trip to South Africa to try and sell traffic flow management systems for the 2008 World Cup, which was when NATS was just in the foothills of being more of a commercial company. We
Hey,
were
what
hoping
is
to.
NATS? Just so you can explain to people real quick, what is NATS?
NATS is the National Air Traffic Service, so
Yep.
the
Okay.
equivalent of the FAA in the UK.
Yep. Just want to
So
make
that
sure
covers,
people watching outside of the UK know what you're talking about. Perfect. Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
so
Keep
that
going,
covers
please. Yep.
all towers, or most of the towers in the big UK airports, as well as the en route space, as well as halfway across the North Atlantic as well. So yeah, going back to that time, it was an interesting time. It got me into the world of air traffic flow management. So understanding the choreography that goes on between airlines filing flight plans and then applying sector flow restrictions to make sure you don't get too many aircraft in one bit of airspace at one time, because controllers can't cope with an over demand. But having gone into that world and then being sat next to the very person who was going to be building airport collaborative decision making at Heathrow, which was all about sharing the best quality picture of what is about to happen on the ground before the aircraft get into the air. I
Now
was then.
we all know that the traffic is congested at Heathrow, and it's a high demand airport.
Oh
And
yeah,
the
absolutely.
slots, and yeah, right. Yep.
Very, very high demand airport with only two runways, and
With
in
time
its.
restrictions. Yeah.
Yeah, so an arrivals runway and a departures runway, segregated mode. So yeah, and then that was shifting a lot of passengers annually up until the pandemic, around about 80 million just before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Um, and that operation, and once it had implemented airport collaborative decision making, went from around about sub 50% punctuality on regular basis to above 80%, because we'd
Fantastic.
worked out how to sequence aircraft to push back at the right time so that you didn't get
Yeah.
a big delay at the runway holding point, and you've complied with your network slots and you maximize the throughput of the runway. And that
It,
was
it was
a
just a couple of weeks ago that we saw Heathrow cry out and say stop. We can't take all these flights, and so we know that it's a high demand airport and it needs a lot of attention. Hey, listen, Simon, I'm going to jump into that deeper
Mhm.
in a second here. I like to continue to recognize people that join the broadcast, and I want to thank you for joining. We have Steve Suttles joining us here from MD Helicopters. Welcome. We're glad to have you. And should be an interesting conversation today. We're going to talk about uncrewed traffic management, a little offshoot from MD Helicopters. Thanks for joining, Steve. And then we have Simon as well. Glad to have Simon here with us. And then we have, I wish I could pronounce the name. Welcome. Glad to have you with us here today. Thanks a lot. Glad to have you joining us today. Hey, let's continue to follow on your thought process there of your background, if we could, because I not only like people to know, what your subject matter expertise is, your background, but I also like for people to know a little bit about sort of the journey that you've been on. And I'm wondering if you couldn't maybe just take a second and tell people that sort of what brought you to some of the new technology you're working on. What's this journey, that you went through?
So the journey, and the reason why I give the background of the airport collaborative decision making is that discovery that actually you can get a far better result by collaborating across different stakeholders. So knowing that Heathrow Airport is 80 odd airlines, 9 different ground handlers, 5 terminals, 1 air traffic management company, and then the European airspace to fit into. Getting all of those stakeholders aligned and agreeing to change is very, very hard, but it's worth it once you do it. And it's very difficult to prove the results before you go ahead and actually implement some of these technologies. You have to kind of take a little bit of a leap of faith. So that was my first sort of real discovery, is that actually we all can think that we know what the answer and the outcome might be, but actually until you actually do some of these things and try it, you'll never know. So that a lot of the time taken from the initial project standing up, which we thought would only be 18 months, a lot of that was taken up with just arguments. It was prove it. Well,
Conversations and
we can't
discussions.
really, so
Yeah,
we just need to
yeah.
try these things.
So you went from learning all about air traffic, from being in NATS and being in Heathrow and really understanding traffic and its flow and the challenges and the things which work and the things that don't work, and then you begin to see some of the challenges, and then now I know that you're looking at more advanced technologies that we're going to get into a little bit later. But what was that sort of moment where you're saying, oh, we have to do something different, this really doesn't even make sense?
Yeah, well, having been on the moved out of NATS, long story short, job relocation and needed to stay closer to home, I moved to Heathrow Airport, and it was there that the next kind of epiphany came, which was actually you're here at an airport, and you're host to a number of passengers. They aren't your passengers, they are the airline's passengers. And if the airline's having a bad day with its IT, which is about 2 weeks into my job at Heathrow, Heathrow had an impact from British Airways global IT meltdown with a data center failure. So lots and lots of passengers as guests of Heathrow in the terminal buildings going nowhere, and nobody could tell them what to do next. And that's the realization. Actually, we need to work better as an ecosystem to make sure that we are supporting each other, so that we
Yeah,
can
incredible.
avoid those kinds of scenarios where actually it was the people, the staff on the ground that were belonging to the airport that were actually bearing the brunt of people's anger, because these are people that had booked trips of a lifetime, the
Yeah.
people missing out on business meetings, weddings, you name it, and they because nobody could tell them what to do next, they're quite rightly they were getting angry. So
Efficiency in travel is just so important, and so I could see how you being involved in it every single day would place you in a position where you'd say, man, we just have to find better ways to do this. Hey, listen, let me just recognize a couple other people that are out there watching. We have Jean-Marc from a company called Skythread. Looking forward to having you on the broadcast in the future. And then we have Anna Zita, who's joined a lot of our broadcasts in the past from Romania. Welcome. I'm glad to have you from Romania. Anybody else out there watching, if you'd like me to recognize you, just let me know, where you're located at. Hey, Simon, let's jump into sort of the heart of what people want to know about. Is that we want to look at industry challenges and what's being done about those industry challenges. If I were to ask you, what are one or two of the biggest industry challenges out there today that are affecting, efficiency in air traffic management?
Well, I'd say that the biggest challenge and the biggest I guess the source of demand for change is the urban air mobility, advanced air mobility sector, which if you believe the numbers written by PricewaterhouseCoopers, would be worth about £42 billion to the UK economy by 2030. This sector is looking to increase the volume of flights in the air tenfold, and they may well be doing it in chunks of airspace that are far smaller than the traditional big airspace sectors that you operate a commercial airliner in.
Simon, if I could just comment on that real quick. If you think about it, is that we don't really understand the full impact of that yet. You said it's increasing by tenfold, and we're operating in a system today which is safe. It's very safe, but it has its operational challenges today. And if you think about it, I know this isn't what we're talking about, but everyone and their brother, is going out and buying a drone, and they're flying them around, and they're already, the FAA and EASA, they said we got to put some regulations around this, because they're not controlled, because they can fly anywhere at any time, and so they had to react and respond to that. I guess post the explosion of people buying drones in order to continue to maintain safe operations. Okay. And so one of the things that would be critical to me is, understanding, wow, this is this urban air mobility, this uncrewed traffic management, need is out there. And we have all these companies that are growing, and we need to get ahead of that, and if it's really growing at the rate of what you're saying,
well,
10x.
it's kind of the other way. They need to catch up, because these guys are going, and they're showing the way forward. What they're doing in building the sort of AI-driven kind of technologies that control swarms of drones in cloud-native platforms is far ahead of anything that air traffic
That
management
is
is about.
incredible. And just think about the way that people can manage those today already. So I'm only bringing that up. That's not what we're talking about today, but I'm only bringing it up for people that are watching. Listen, just envision the growth that's going to occur in unmanned vehicles. And maybe just for a minute, let's try to explain what that really means, Simon. If you could help people watching. We used to refer to air traffic control, ATC. When I started flying as a kid, we called it ATC, air traffic control, and then I see the word ATM thrown out there, and I see UTM thrown out there. Just explain to people, quickly why we have some changes in terminology and what's the difference.
Well, I guess the difference between air traffic control and air traffic management is that the control is always going to be that the pilot and the controller have that two-way communication, and the controller instructs the pilot to take a certain turn or climb to a certain level, descend, etc., etc. So they have that executive control. But air traffic management is more about making sure that the system of systems is going to be able to cope with the demands of the aircraft that are up in the sky. So it's going to be there to prevent any of those kinds of scenarios where you're overloading a controller or a pilot with too much.
And then we have this new term that's come up called UTM. What is that?
Yeah, uncrewed traffic management is the term we use today, and that is all about making sure that, again, you don't have too many vehicles operating in one particular sector at any given time. So you're guaranteeing that safety. It's like your insurance policy, in effect.
Okay. So you've rightly pointed out that we have this very rapid growth in potentially unmanned vehicles, or eVTOLs, or vehicles which basically may not be following in a traditional navigational system or pattern. We don't even know that. I don't even know that yet. So
Yeah.
that's
and
one.
and they'll
Right?
have different flying characteristics as well. So a fixed wing and a rotorcraft will fly very differently, and these quadcopters and or multi-rotor vehicles have very different characteristics. They can hover, they can go backwards. That they
Great.
so there's different ways of controlling these things, and making sure that they can stay out of trouble, and those are far beyond the systems that today's ATM would know. So even some of the medium-term conflict detection tools that are in place in the UK, they may well not be able to cope with some of these vehicle types without having some reprogramming and some behaviors programmed in, so they understand what are the capabilities of these vehicles, and what could you do with them to communicate with them in an
Yeah.
emergency.
So what other challenges are we seeing in the industry besides prolific growth right now? What else are we seeing today?
So today, technology is moving on at such a pace, and we know that the likes of Amazon and the likes of Microsoft and Google have cloud offerings. They give you a whole sweetie shop of different types of technology that you could build all sorts of clever stuff with. But that kind of technology doesn't easily integrate with the legacy systems that we have of today, which are built in the and they have roots in the teletypewriter era. And I think if you pop to NATS today, you may well still find that the main national airspace system is still running on the old IBM mainframe code that was around when the moon landings happened. So this
Okay,
kind
all
of
right. Well, since we brought up that thought of technology, maybe we'll shift and begin that conversation. So we've identified growth in the industry, technologies which are lagging, and and I always like to point out, I've always been a person who's an advocate of aviation and of the industry, and an advocate of safety. And if you look at safety today, it's so much better than what it ever has been ever in history. And so when we talk about these things, we don't talk about things being unsafe. I actually never use that. What we talk about is that how do we optimize the operations? How do we continue to increase the margins of safety, in all the things that we do? And so as we begin to look at sort of technology, and we might be pointing out certain things, we're not talking about unsafe environments. We're talking about, the evolution of things. How do we manage more and more efficiently, and how do we use advanced technology? So let's move into technology. What are some of the thoughts you have on technology that are going to need to be applied in these kind of environments today?
So the challenge we have is that the hermetically sealed world of ATM, and it is safe, no doubt. That world needs to connect up with the world of the UTMs, and who have been developing in the cloud native technologies, and that that kind of trust that you had established within the old traditional ATM world, which is based on perimeter security. You've got a pilot who's been through flight school, he's got a uniform, sits in the cockpit of the aircraft, has been through all the security checks through the airport to make sure that that is the right person that should be sat in that cockpit. You have that as your model for security for the human around the pilot, and similarly for the controller. They will go through a rigorous process, and they will know their teammates. Anyone will be able to spot somebody who's sat in a chair that doesn't belong to that watch or shift. And so the controls that you have in place are a lot less strict within those settings. But the IT that you have in the UTM world, you need to establish some level of trust, because your pilots are going to be out literally in the field. That you won't know where they are. You won't even know where the brain is that's controlling some of these aircraft if they're flying in some sort of swarm, because it's hosted
Yeah.
in the cloud.
So,
So
so we have.
you're taking that security model, and you've got to reimagine your security model, whereby you've got to establish trust in a different way.
So you brought up a couple of major points there. You said, number one, first of all, you said that we have to look at collaboration. You said we have new technologies emerging, and those new technologies, are being matched with existing technologies in ATM systems. And you're saying, how do we create that, collaboration? That was the first thing I heard you say. The second thing I heard you say is that we have controlling and collaboration coming from different points. We have them coming from maybe vehicles, and we have them coming from people and pilots, and maybe they're on the ground, and it comes from ATC or automation. And so maybe we address the first part of that right now. So the first half of that was collaboration between new technologies and new providers and maybe existing air traffic management systems. What's the critical element that you're looking at there right now? What are the concerns, and what are we going to do to be able to address those things from a technology standpoint?
Well, I guess always the critical element is the trust that a human has in the information that they see in front of them. So is that information coming from a known and trusted entity? Is it coming from somebody that we have proof and provenance that they are authorized and able to put that information into the system? Because obviously, if you put information in front of an air traffic controller that could be corrupted or could be misleading, then that takes workload to process, and as soon as you start eroding that trust, then you have a problem. So what we need to establish is that trust. So that's the big piece for me, which was
Okay,
another
so
epiphany along the
trust,
route.
trust, that makes sense. So collaboration, we have to establish trust. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on how does using blockchain technology come into play with the ability to, number one, collaborate, and number two, the ability to be able to trust. Maybe if you could address those two pieces for us.
So in terms of the ability to be able to collaborate, I think what it offers you is that distributed ledger capability. So you can distribute and you can authorize entities that have the ability to update certain bits of information about a flight. So let's take, for instance, an off-block time of an aircraft. Normally, the ops control center will know the best off-block time because they filed the flight plan. But as you get closer and closer to the off-block time, the ground handler has a better idea and understanding, and they should then be authorized to overwrite that bit of information. So that at any point in time, everybody has the best shared collaborative version of the truth, and that is kind of fundamental to the way that a blockchain works. You put the information in, and then that's distributed across all the known actors. Not everybody then, if they're authorized, gets to see that information. So you've got a collaborative state store. So at all times, everybody knows the best known
Yeah.
state.
So
That is
so
one of the
we so
intrinsic
we
natures
have
of
that
a blockchain, which is really attractive.
So we have that collaboration that's occurring. Okay, that's solid. That's positive. All right. That now the blockchain enables us to be able to put the information in a place where it can be more easily collaborated to and then integrated with. And then help me understand this a little bit better. Is that where does the trust element come from though? Is how do we ensure that when we're doing that we're ensuring trust in that data though?
Sure. So when you're doing your online banking, you've got a certificate. So you will recognize that when you've seen your certificate and you've got a tick mark against it, or it's come up as a certificate that's now expired or revoked, you know not to trust that website. Having that kind of certificate, that digital certificate, helps you be reassured that the information you're dealing with is from somebody who's genuinely entitled to be within that operating network. But then trust is a very tricky one to establish within the ATM world, because we know today that the ATM world is decentralized. It always has been. It always has been a cooperation between nation states, and connecting up those nation states with physical, what was previously physical links between air traffic control centers to send messages between them. The message-oriented architecture of the network was built around the teletypewriters and the exchanges you had previous to that, which was people with Morse codes, and they would forward on the messages to the next station. So
We kind of moved beyond that, haven't we?
we have, but
Yeah,
in principle, it still
yeah,
remains. There is
yeah,
no central authority or central control of all that messaging that goes around the ATM network today.
yeah,
So if you try to establish trust by using a trust root certificate authority, what you've actually done is centralize ATM. And that for me is something that I realized with a conversation with one of my cybersecurity architects while I was at Heathrow, and saying, well, who owns the liability of issuing those certificates? Can you imagine one central entity wanting to take on that kind of liability of
yeah,
sending air
yeah,
traffic management messages around the network
yeah,
with information such as who's on a royal flight or who's where the military flights are going? I don't think
yeah,
so. And no nation state would ever sign up to that. And
right.
which is where I feel, in my experience, some of the projects at a European level have kind of got a little bit stuck with the private key infrastructures, because somebody has to take on that liability.
Yeah. Well, Simon, I know that you have done an extensive amount of study in this area. I know that you, in conjunction, where you were part of a team with Cranfield University, where there was some study done in this area. But for those of you watching, I'm not an expert on Cranfield University, but I did interview a few weeks back one of the professors from Cranfield, and they're an aviation university, but they're very high tech, and they've been doing a lot of different studies in a lot of areas, including air traffic management. And they did a study, detailed study on uncrewed traffic management in the area of blockchain and some of the technologies going forward. And I wonder if you could maybe tell people a little bit about that, because I think that's central to sort of the work that you've done in understanding the application of this technology and where it's going and how rapidly it can get there. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the project was actually much bigger than just Cranfield University. So it was
Oh, okay.
a
Yep.
consortium of 13 partners working under the UK Research and Innovation grant of around about £4.6 million, and that was the project called Fly2Plan. And what we did with that was to try and bring together the existing stakeholders. So we've had IAG, the owner of British Airways and Welling, and a number of other airlines, NATS, the UK ATM provider, and Heathrow, together with some of the traditional IT providers, CETA and IBS, as well as some of the new startups that were coming through with drone operations. That was Consortic, as well as Altitude Angel, and a small software company that specialized in software safety. That was Tech Tower. Together with Cranfield University, as well as Oxford University and their Department of Computer Science, and the UK's Digital Catapult, we formed a consortium to go and look at the challenges and look at how we could bring together ATM and UTM and govern it and create an open source blockchain and understand the security matters and concerns around that open source blockchain project. And so yeah, the project ran for 15 months from October 2022, 2020 to this year, and that was the result of that project was the report that Dimitri, my good friend Dimitri at Cranfield, published back in June this year. So hopefully we'll put that in the chat after this session and give people access
Yeah,
to that.
I think that would be good. Why don't we put a link in the chat at the end and allow people to be able to go look at that report, because I've read it, and it's actually very, very interesting. It's very insightful. And for those of you watching, we're actually going to have Dimitri on this broadcast. I think it's on August 17th, and we're going to be talking more in detail of it. But my point in bringing that up is that I know a lot of people ask is that, is this technology real? Okay, we have a problem. We have a growth of the system, and we have this need for collaboration, and we have to move more, vehicles in the air, more aircraft, and so I think people ask is that, is that, okay, the problem is real, but is this technology real, and is the solution real, and how far away really is it? So could you maybe address the person
Mm.
who's thinking, is this real, and how far away really is it, today?
Well, I would say the R&D project, we created some proof of concepts and demonstrators. And what we showed people was the art of the possible. So you can take the technology, you can blend it together, you can work with industry standard data models, you can work with cloud technologies, you can work with containerization, you can work with self-sovereign identities to build that trust framework and that trust, that decentralized private key infrastructure. All of these things are possible, and I think showing people the art of the possible is the most important step. So we're a little way off industrialization, has to be said, but it's CETA, the original provider of the flight chain source code and the foundation that we built on, are still running with it now. And I think
Yeah.
what we can see now is that there will be a time when people will demand that these kinds of solutions come in, because we know that there is a challenge with scale. We know that
Yeah.
there is a challenge with modernization. So,
And that's the thing, Simon, is that we can't wait to address those things until they become, problems. Like the drone example I brought up is that,
mhm,
if you have drones flying around everywhere and there's no controls over them, I mean, they're going to be running into airplanes, and they're going to be
mhm,
running into populated areas. And, and if we don't address the movement of the industry and the advancements that are happening in the industry, as the time becomes appropriate, we create problems, as a
mm,
result of that. Yeah. And so, for those of you asking out there, is this even really real? Listen, Jean-Marc said, "Oh, 9 episodes already. Keep going." Thanks, Jean-Marc. I appreciate it. Where we're addressing blockchain and aviation. And one of the reasons that I am is because, I would challenge people out there is that, before we even started talking about these things, how many blockchain and aviation projects could you have named or come up with? Okay. Probably not very many, maybe one or two, maybe at the most. And as we've moved down this path, we've identified that blockchain is being used in so many different areas already today. And some are in production, and some are in development, and some are innovative ideas, and we're looking at places to apply them. And so my challenge from the beginning was saying we need to look at the challenges that we have in the industry. All right, the problems we have. Number one, growth. All right, growth of unmanned vehicles. All right, number two, collaboration. We look at the challenge we have and we say, how are we going to solve that problem? Does the current technical infrastructure enable us to be able to manage that traffic? I'm going to ask you that question, Simon. Does the current technical infrastructure we have in air traffic management allow us to increase aircraft by tenfold?
no.
It
Your,
just
your
doesn't.
answers in some instances, no.
No, it's like a short, concise answer. No. All right. And so either there's going to be a bottleneck created where we can't advance and move this technology out and forward, or it's going to move forward ahead of, the ability to be able to manage it. But what we really need to be doing is we need to be putting in place the requirements necessary to be able to manage that growth, because we all know how exciting it is. Hey, listen, Simon, I want to tell you something real quick. Is that I've traveled all over the world for many, many years. And before the pandemic, one time I was down in Sao Paulo, and there's an airport to the north and there's an airport to the south. There's a number of them in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. And what really was, it's not that far from San Jose dos Campos to Guerreros Airport in the north. And I don't know how far it is, but if there was no traffic, it would take you maybe 30 or 45 minutes. But, it took me 3 or 4 hours one day to get there. And the traffic was so bad that, people were on the freeway and they were actually selling, like candy bars and things to people in the cars because the traffic was basically stopped, right?
Wow.
And what happened is that they implemented a helicopter service where you could fly there in just a few minutes, all right, from one airport to the next. And so the reason I bring that up is that that's a perfect example of a real world problem that exists that's being solved by point to point, urban air mobility and helicopter service and things like that. And so this is going to move forward faster than any of us could possibly imagine, in my opinion, at this point. What do you think?
So I've heard of the Sao Paulo example, and it is it's a great example of, you can get, for the people that aren't willing to suffer that long journey through the urban traffic, and they've got the money to pay for it, then yeah, they will take it. But I think we can look at in the UK and perhaps in North America, some of the examples around deliveries and reaching some of the remote places in the country. So we've got highlands and islands up at the top of the country. Some of them are very remote, and to keep them connected, it may well be that actually the most efficient way of doing that is to provide some sort of autonomous service to get the goods in and out, or maybe at some point in the future the people in and out. But you know, there is always a balance with some of these things, because you have to recognize that, you know, sometimes the person that's doing the air traffic control at those remote places is also the postmaster and is also the publican of the local pub, and you know, there's always
So
going to
what
be.
you're bringing up though is that you're suggesting that we're going to see unmanned, traffic management for things like deliveries and things like that long before we're going to see it for people, movement. Is that what you're saying?
What I think the demonstrators we're going to be seeing in the Future Flight Challenge Phase 3, which is getting underway, they all look at having either a remote pilot or a pilot on board the craft. So going fully autonomous is some time off, I think, but it's I'm not one of these pundits that's going to take a bet on when you're going to see it for real.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Just a couple of years ago, I said to myself, is that I just don't see that we're going to have electric aircraft, anytime in the near future, because just the technology and the weight of batteries and the capacity of batteries, just didn't support it. And so just a few years ago, I thought that electric, engines, electric motors were much further off, than what they are today. And today they're in use. All right. And so, I think as we see the advancement of technology, we're going to see these things move forward, much more quickly. Hey, Simon, I want to move into the next piece of this. I know you're involved in something called Fly2Plan. It's well, tell people what it is. What are you involved in? What is it basically?
So that's a project now that's now finished, and that was the project that we established with the Future Flight Challenge. What we essentially did from a technology level was take some of the Hyperledger Fabric capabilities, look at how we could containerize those, build a Byzantine fault-tolerant network, because we knew that actually the air traffic management system as we know it today is decentralized, and it also includes some of the countries which perhaps aren't as trustworthy amongst some of the others. So let's take North Korea, for instance. That's got a connection to China. But it still means that anybody could send a message to North Korea, and they could send a message to anybody else. So that's that kind of need for a network that could tolerate some sort of misbehavior on the network was essential. So we changed the consensus mechanism, and we put a Byzantine fault tolerant mechanism in. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that on how it works. So I will leave that to others far more qualified to explain that. And we also
Actually,
did
we're going to have some more conversation on that on Monday, so we can get into more technical details. But the question I have is that it's built on the blockchain, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And
it's built on a distributed ledger. So
a distributed ledger.
Yeah. So let's make that distinction clear. It's not on a public blockchain. It's not.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
It's not
so
using
it uses
Ethereum or anything else.
Okay, it uses distributed ledger technology to be able to provide a platform so there can be collaboration and access and sharing of the air traffic management data. That's correct? Is that
correct?
Yeah,
and with that differential privacy assurance, so that you know that the information you put on and you give permissions to others to be able to view or change means that they can do that, but nobody else can see the information. But they can verify that something happened and it was done by an authorized entity, and nothing more than that. So that's how you build up the network of trust.
And what is your involvement in that? Was that was looked at, during the study phase, and then there's deployment work being done today? Just tell me a little bit more about it.
So the project was part of the Future Flight Challenge. The Future Flight Challenge was a three-phased project. The first phase was to get some expressions of interest to address the system of systems challenge and address the fact that the system of systems won't scale. We put forward an initial smaller consortium of about 6 partners, which then grew to 13 to make sure that we got all the views and all of the academic expertise that we needed to qualify for the funding. And that phase 2 project was expected to go into another follow-up phase to then go further and industrialize. But actually, what actually happened was the challenge fund was even more oversubscribed the next time around, and the project didn't make the cut. So unfortunately, the all of the code that we've developed is now on the shelf. It's in an open source repo, which one of my colleagues may be able to point you in the right direction to. And then that's as far as it's gone. But we do know that the colleagues in CETA, who initially brought the flight chain product to the table for us to change and to integrate some of these new capabilities, the Byzantine fault tolerance, they are still looking after that and making sure that it continues to build on the good research foundation that we've done.
And Simon, who are the major partners that were just some of the major partners that were involved? You've named CETA and Cranfield University, and
Yep.
who else?
Yep. So I've got my list up here, so just to remind me.
Oh, okay.
We had Heathrow Airport, and while I was at Heathrow Airport, it was there that I established the project. International Airlines Group, NATS, the UK air traffic control provider. We had CETA and IBS. IBS are the database provider at Heathrow Airport. We also had Consortic, who are a drone training company, as also a drone flying company. Altitude Angel, who provide UTM, and they provide the Guardian UTM platform. We had Cirium, who formerly the Snowflake software, who were experts in the more modern data exchange protocols in air traffic management. So the Fixums of the world, if you're familiar with that. And then on the other side, looking at the airports data exchange side of the world, we had Rockport Software, who look after the ACI Acris semantic model. Tech Tower, and my former business partner Matt, who's an absolute whiz at software safety, and he was the one in the brains behind medium-term conflict detection.
Yeah, he's actually going to be on the broadcast on Monday. We've got him coming on to the broadcast,
Fantastic.
so we're going to be talking more details about that. Yeah.
Save all your technical questions for him.
Okay.
The techier, the better. He'll love it.
Well,
and
hey,
then,
the reason. Oh,
there's,
go
there's
ahead.
three more to cover. There's
go ahead.
Cranfield University, and who were brought in to do the trust and assurance in autonomy and AI. So they were looking specifically around how does blockchain work for AI, and vice versa. How can AI work for the blockchain? Oxford University and Louise Axon, who was the researcher there, did a fantastic paper on use of blockchain technology for decentralized PKI. And there's another white paper that we could put in the chat following this. And then finally, the Digital Catapult, who are a non-government organization in the UK, part of the Catapults network, and they're designed to bring in industry, academia, small medium enterprises, and big established companies to accelerate some of the concepts. And they brought a product management capability as well as a capability in distributed ledger. So yeah, it was a dream team.
It absolutely is, and I just was going to say that one of the things that we need when we're trying to, bring new technologies forward like this into new market spaces is we need to have people that are scientists and people that are subject matter experts and people that have industry knowledge and knowledge of execution. And it sounds like you put together a real knowledgeable team to be able to address this and to be able to begin helping to move this forward. This whole idea forward.
Yeah, and really, why I'm here is to help hopefully allow others to see all the good research that we've done and allow others to then stand on the shoulders of what we've created and what we've done.
Good.
Because you do have to make sure that you can lift others up and pass on the knowledge, specifically in the scientific community, because that's how we learn as people, and that's how we end up being able to engineer better systems, is by putting the learning and the knowledge out there and allowing others to also to build upon it. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And for those of you watching today, the reason that I wanted to bring Simon on today is because of his background in air traffic management and data and blockchain, specific experience in these areas, and then having been involved in some of the studies, that we're doing. And so I know that there's people out there that want to learn more about it. And you mentioned a couple of times, there's a few things that you're going to put into the chat. Simon, tell people what you're going to do. You're going to put a link in the comments to what? You're going to put two things out there. What is it?
Yeah, I've got a link to the paper that Dimitri led the authoring, and that was contributed to by myself, Tuli from CETA. It was also Dimitri and Carolina at Cranfield University, Rob from the Digital Catapult, and Louise from Oxford University. We all pulled together the final thoughts and presented back the paper for Cranfield to then issue out. So yeah, I'll put the link to that in the chat. I'll also put a link in to just so you can see some of the challenges that we have with private key infrastructures within single European sky. I can show you that the projects that were expected to deliver a long time ago still haven't delivered. So you can see that there's an opportunity here to provide some different technology. And I can also provide a link to Louise's paper on decentralized PKIs as well.
Oh, do that. Okay, good. So let's put those in the comments at the conclusion of the broadcast. And Simon, if someone wants to reach out directly to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Tap me up on LinkedIn. I'm UK Simon Brown. So there's probably quite a few Simon Browns in the world.
Okay.
But I'm also connected to Mark as well.
Trouble,
so it should be easy to find from your followers.
If you have any troubles getting a hold of them, shoot me an email, and I can always connect you guys on LinkedIn. But listen, one of the things that some of the objectives I have, I told you guys this before, is that I'm trying to make you aware of the things that are happening in the industry, in aviation industry. And the technologies, how it's coming together to help us solve business problems and create better efficiency, in our industry. And this, air traffic management is clearly a place where, we're going to have to provide better efficiency in order to be able to handle the growth, in the system that exists today. And so this is a very important topic. And Simon, I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your knowledge with people and being able to share these white papers. And so, Simon, thanks so much. I really appreciate you bringing these things together and bringing them to our attention today.
That's been a pleasure, Mark. Thank you very much for inviting me, and take care and enjoy the weekend.
Yeah, good. So just to let you guys know what's coming next is actually Monday. I had already made a reference is that we have Matt, who's your business partner. I'm sorry, what's Matt's last
Matt
name?
Banham.
Yeah,
Matt
Banham. And Matt is going to be here on Monday, and he's going to talk more about some of the technical details of air traffic management and Tech Tower, and specifically the services and solutions that they're implementing. And then I want to start advising you about my broadcast on Wednesday, if I could. I had a very special guest I wanted to bring in from Bangkok, and we unfortunately just couldn't find a time to make it work. And so I'm actually going to be moving the broadcast 3 hours earlier on Wednesday. And so normally it's coming to you at 1600 GMT. And so we're actually going to move it ahead 3 hours to 1300. And I know that in the US, it's not going to be possible for people to be able to watch it at 5 o'clock in the morning. But never fear, there's recordings of that, and you will be able to watch a recording of it. And but I really felt like it was important to bring this expertise in on Wednesday. So I'm just telling you now that Wednesday's broadcast is going to be early. And then we also have a third guest on Friday. But listen, I'm continuing to try to find interesting speakers like Simon that can come here and share knowledge in different areas. We've talked about cryptocurrency, and we've talked about air traffic management, and we've talked about, blockchain in supply chain solutions, and, and all sorts of different things. And we're continuing to grow and expand that. We're on our 9th episode of 24. We're actually going to have, 24 total throughout the month of August. And so you are not going to want to miss this. And if you do, I'm going to be providing in the very near future a place where you can go look at the recordings more conveniently and access them. But thanks everybody for joining, and I appreciate you supporting our blockchain and aviation broadcast that we're doing. I am passionate about digital. I'm passionate about aviation, and when I ever have an opportunity to be able to talk on the two and bring in guests that have the same passions, it's fun for me. So Simon, I hope you enjoyed yourself as well.
Very much so, Mark. Thanks very much.
Yep, good. Hey, listen, everybody, thanks for joining today. Fair winds and following seas, and I want to thank you for being with us. Have a great day. Bye for now.